Welcome to Kindred Spirits Book Club, the podcast where two grown-ass ladies geek out about Anne of Green Gables. I'm Reagan Duffy, and I'm here with my co-host, Kelly Gerner. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Reagan. Hi, Kindred Spirits. Listeners, are you following us on Instagram yet? If not, please do. We have so much fun over there sharing pictures and videos about the Anne books, about bookish life generally, about Prince Edward Island. And you can find us on Instagram at kindredspirits.bookclub. Also, love hearing from all of you. So whether you email us at kindredspirits.bookclub@gmail.com or if you DM us on Instagram, we would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. And also, Kindred Spirits, we do have a favor to ask. If you are enjoying this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts if that's where you listen. If you listen on Spotify or Pocket Casts, those also now have the ability to rate podcasts and leave comments. So if those are your podcatchers of choice, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars as well. If you are not enjoying this podcast, please ignore this plea.
In that case, why are you listening to us?
Why are you listening? Go do something better with your life.
Don't spend it listening to podcasts you don't enjoy.
These ratings actually really help us because they mean that Kindred Spirits Book Club will be more likely to get promoted by those sites, and therefore other Kindred Spirits can find us.
Well, Kindred Spirits, we are going to skip our usual chit chat today because we are going to get right into some of the themes of Anne of Ingleside. And today we're going to focus particularly around the themes of family and home. Ingleside is so much more than just a house for the Blythe family. It's also a place where they can be fully themselves, safe, protected, and loved. The word Ingleside means fireside, if you didn't know that. It implies coziness, warmth, and comfort, all of those things that are undeniably true of family life in this book. One of the pleasures of Anne of Ingleside is seeing how Anne Shirley Blythe has made Ingleside into the idyllic childhood home that she did not get to experience until much later in her life. Let's move right into our kindred spirit. And today, our kindred spirit of the episode is Ingleside. Not exactly the house itself, which we think is not quite as well developed in its descriptions as Green Gables or the House of Dreams, even Patty Place or Windy Poplars. But we mean Ingleside itself as a representation of home for Anne, Gilbert, and their family is a kindred spirit. It's a spirit of connection, intimacy, and love. Ingleside represents the happy, safe childhood Anne did not have. The warm hearth, stocked larder, and beautiful gardens, the comfortable beds, but also the tenderness and scope for imagination and compassion and support required to shepherd little children through the world.
For our quote of the episode, early on in the book, Anne is heading home after a visit to Avonlea. On the train ride home, she reflects back on her visit, but then, quote, her thoughts ran ahead of her to the loved things before her. Her heart sang all the way because she was going home to a joyous house, a house where everyone who crossed its threshold knew it was a home, a house that was filled all the time with laughter and silver mugs and snapshots and babies, precious things with curls and chubby knees, and rooms that would welcome her, where the chairs waited patiently and the dresses in her closet were expecting her, where little anniversaries were always being celebrated and little secrets were always being whispered. It's lovely to feel you like going home, thought Anne.
Oh, I love that.
I love having that sense of returning home myself.
Me too.
And we also love this quote because it perfectly sets up Ingleside as a place that is more than just a house. Anne's journey throughout this entire series has been one toward home, family, and belonging, and now it's been completed. And as people who have loved being on this journey with her, it's a joy for us to know that Anne has created this perfect place to raise her family and call her own.
Well, let's get right into Story Club today. Anne of Ingleside is comprised of a series of vignettes about Anne and the Blythe children, and it takes place over a period of about 6 years. Anne's oldest child, Jem, is about 6 at the beginning and about 12 years old at the end. And likewise, Anne's youngest child, Rilla, is born early in the book and is age 6 by the end of the book. All of her children get at least one point of view chapter, except for Shirley.
Justice for Shirley.
Truly. The kids are all about 6, 7, or 8 for those point of view chapters. And as we discussed in our recap episode, this can make the book a bit of a tough read for adults. Most of the conflict, such as it is, are childhood misunderstandings, easily explained, easily remedied. And we found some of the parts narrated by the children a little cloying or a little too sweet for our tastes. The undeniable through line, however, is family and home. As we said a moment ago, Ingleside is more than a house. It's representative of a safe, loving early childhood. Anne and Gilbert seem like gentle, benevolent parents, and the Blythe children are given a lot of space to make mistakes and figure out what kind of people they are becoming. Many of the episodes in Anne of Ingleside follow a similar trajectory. One of the Blythe children has a new experience outside of the home. There's often a misunderstanding involved. There's a minor drama that leads to a brave climax. And then once safely home, the child tells all to a compassionate and understanding Anne, who reassures them that all will be well. We're going to be looking more closely at a few of these little vignettes. But first, we really have to discuss Anne of Ingleside's big bad, such as it is, Aunt Mary Maria. So Aunt Mary Maria is Gilbert's aunt, and she comes to stay at Ingleside at the beginning of the book for a couple of weeks following the death of her cousin, Gilbert's father. Anne is not overjoyed at the prospect of a long visit, quote, especially now, which alludes to her pregnancy with Rilla. But Anne also seems resigned, saying, quote, you know how the doctor is about such things. Gilbert, we are given to understand, is clannish and will not limit his hospitality where his family is concerned.
Reagan, do we think that the death of Gilbert's dad is like contributing to his extra clannishness in this moment? Because he's grieving, he can't bear to set reasonable boundaries with someone who makes him think of his father or someone who's of his father's generation.
Yeah, maybe even the last connection to his father.
Right.
And honestly, that's a good enough explanation as any, and actually makes Gilbert a little bit more sympathetic during this time period. So yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, the first third of this book is like tough look for our guy Gilbert.
So Aunt Mary Maria is a miserable woman who judges the housekeeping, complains nonstop, criticizes the kids, oversteps Anne and Gilbert's authority in matters of parenting, and is outright rude to Susan Baker, the Blythe's live-in domestic servant. A little early power struggle erupts over whether Susan will eat dinner with the Blythes while Aunt Mary Maria is staying there. Susan never sits with the family at dinner when there are guests ordinarily, but when it's just family, she does. Anne instructs Susan to sit with them for dinner while Aunt Maria is their guest, explaining that she considers them both members of the family. Aunt Mary Maria expresses her disapproval of this arrangement by refusing to talk to Susan at dinner.
It's breathtakingly rude, honestly.
Truly, and immediately sets up Aunt Mary Maria as somebody who is disrupting the peace of Ingleside.
And that dynamic gets right to the heart of a theme that we so often discuss in the Anne series, that of defining insiders and outsiders. We talked about how when Anne first came to Avonlea, she relied on Avonlea insiders like Mrs. Lynde and Diana to inform her about community norms. And then in Windy Poplars, Rebecca Dew and the widows are the insiders that help Anne navigate the Summerside dynamics. They give her all the information about the Pringle family, for instance. And we see it even once more. When Anne and Gilbert first moved to Glen St. Mary in House of Dreams, Miss Cornelia takes on the role of Glen St. Mary insider. And in this book, there's a clear line between Ingleside insiders and outsiders. Anne and Gilbert, the children, and Susan are all Ingleside insiders. Anne wants to be gracious and extend insider status to Aunt Mary Maria, but someone like her could never be a kindred spirit and could never be an Ingleside insider. With an Ingleside outsider in the home, the peace and tranquility of that place is at risk. Unfortunately, Aunt Mary Maria is still at Ingleside when Anne delivers Arilla, her last child.
Which is truly wild. Who thinks they are close enough to be staying in someone's home for a childbirth?
I know. I mean, I get it that it's their 6th kid or whatever, but every childbirth is a labor. And having unwanted house guests, this is not the time.
No.
Most of these chapters around Rilla's birth are told through Anne's son Walter's point of view, so there are some kind of gaps in his knowledge. But what we do see with respect to the Blythe's house guest is absolutely uncalled for. Anne and Gilbert decided to send their kids to stay with friends and relatives for a few days around the birth because Anne was very ill after she had Shirley, her youngest son. They decided to send Walter to the Parker family. Dr. Parker is a friend and colleague of Gilbert's, and Mrs. Parker is a friend of Anne's, not precisely a kindred spirit, but it seems like they're friends. And the Parkers had children around Walter's age, and they lived fairly close to Ingleside. This is tough for Walter. He is a gentle young soul. He's a poet in the making. He is sensitive and he notices things. And although the adults won't tell him about Anne's pregnancy, a topic thought to be too indelicate for young children, I guess, he feels that hum of anxiety at home, and he's nervous about being sent away. Aunt Mary Maria calls him, quote, far too nervous and high-strung, but Anne and Gilbert are tender and understanding with him. His older brother Jem is protective of him, and Susan, she defends him loyally, as if her own honor depended on it. But so when we think about Ingleside as a place of safety and love, this kind of acceptance of exactly who you are, is a part of that. Walter's family knows who he is, and they love him for that. They don't want him to change, and they fight back against the forces in the world that do want a dreamy little boy to be someone he isn't. And right now, that force is Aunt Mary Maria, who tells Walter sharply that Mrs. Dr. Parker won't put up with any of his nonsense at dinner. The nonsense in this case being that Walter only ate the lean part of his meat and left the fat on the plate. Anne pushes back. She tells Aunt Mary Maria, don't frighten Walter. And Maud tells us that there's a little spark kindling far down in Anne's eyes. Aunt Mary Maria passive-aggressively retorts, I'm sorry, Annie. I should, of course, have remembered I've no right to teach your children anything.
Oh, well.
Gilbert, in testament to his clannishness, gives Anne a bit of a reproachful look. And, as you all know, normally we are Gilbert's biggest fan, but this is not a highlight. I mean, Anne is literally about to give birth. She goes into labor a couple paragraphs later. So, we're talking, within hours.
Honestly.
And let's not forget that they have been enduring Aunt Mary Maria for at least a month now, and everyone is on tenterhooks because Anne's health is so at risk at this moment. Gilbert, be better.
Seriously. Aunt Mary Maria is finding hurt where there is none to find, and she needs to manage her own feelings, not put them on the very incredibly pregnant lady who has been hosting her so very thoughtfully up to this point. But Anne, heroically, as far as we are concerned, rises above and graciously asks Aunt Mary Maria how her tea is. Aunt Mary Maria responds, quote, too weak, but it doesn't matter. Who cares whether a poor old woman gets her tea to her liking or not? Some folks, however, think I'm real good company.
The audacity.
Also, I would like receipts. Which folks?
Which folks? Yeah. Pixar, it didn't happen.
Is Aunt Mary Maria related to the sour Mrs. Gibson from Windy Poplars or Valency's mother from the Blue Castle? Because that kind of jab could come right out of either of their playbooks.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And then in a sort of arch tone, I mean, Maud is so funny when she wants to be, but she tells us that Anne was unable to make the connection between those two sentences, getting her tea the way she wants and some folks thinking she's good company. But Anne is unable to make the connection because she literally begins going into labor as Aunt Mary Maria is speaking. So Anne goes upstairs, as you do. She asks Gilbert to call Miss Carson, who I'm guessing is a nurse or a midwife. He goes to the stables to get ready to take Walter to the Parker house, and Aunt Mary Maria is left behind to say goodbye to the child by telling him, quote, mind your table manners at Lowbridge, Walter. Mind you ain't greedy. If you are, a big black man will come along with a big black bag to pop naughty children into.
Oof.
So, in addition to Aunt Mary Maria using fear tactics to compel good behavior from children, it appears she's also racist. We're told that Anne and Gilbert did not hear this and would have been furious if they had. Susan did hear this and nearly threw the gravy boat at Aunt Mary Maria, so there is that at least.
I'm not usually a Susan fan, but she would have been absolutely justified if she did.
Oh, for sure. So, Walter goes to the Parker house. He has a terrible time. I mean, he's in a misery. We'll talk a little bit more about it in the next episode. But at any rate, he decides that he's going to walk home 6 miles on an unusually cold night in order to escape that situation. Walter returns home to Ingleside just in time to meet his newborn sister. He is in love with her immediately, from her darling little curly toes to her red gold hair. And it seems like everyone is gathered around the newborn, showering her with love and adoration, as is only right and proper with newborns. When Anne says, she is a miracle. All of our babies were sweet, Gilbert, but she is sweetest of them all. And this is certainly a well-earned moment of motherly pride, but we also think this might indicate that maybe Anne and Gilbert were not sure if they would be able to have another child after Shirley's harrowing birth. We are never given any details of what that trouble was, but we know that it was serious enough that Anne's life was at risk and she was sick for months and months to follow. It seems likely that Anne and Gilbert may have believed that another child would not be possible for them, so Rilla truly is a miracle baby in that sense. Aunt Mary Maria, however, utterly misses this nuance when she remarks, Lord love ya. There have been a few babies in the world before, you know, Annie. We love that our sensitive, brave, and honest Walter replies, Our baby has never been in the world before, Aunt Mary Maria. Susan, may I kiss her? Just once, please?
Perfect comeback, Walter. Later that night, Anne is resting in bed with her baby and has this moment of reflection. Quote, soon she would be about with them again, light-footed as of yore, loving them, teaching them, comforting them. She would hold all the threads of the Ingleside life in her hands again to weave into a tapestry of beauty. And Aunt Mary Maria should have no cause to say, as Anne had heard her say 2 days ago, you look dreadful tired, Gilbert. Does anybody ever look after you?
Oh, she's so awful. Anne has literally been in her final trimester of pregnancy throughout her entire visit. Plus, there's all the other kids running around and this huge house to maintain. So, I'm so sorry, Gilbert, actual adult man, that you are not the top priority right now. And shame on Aunt Mary Maria for saying any differently.
Aunt Mary Maria is not a girl's girl.
She is not a girl's girl. And what's more, she is not an Inglesider. Anne is giving us that beautiful description of the tapestry of life at Ingleside. And it's one that simply does not include Aunt Mary Maria. She doesn't fit in with this family or in this home. And the longer she stays, the wider and deeper those cracks become.
And a month after Rilla's birth, she's still there. She will occasionally say, whenever you're tired of me, just let me know. I'm used to looking after myself. But of course, no one can never tell her to go. And Gilbert always falls for this passive-aggressive remark, assuring her that she is welcome. Summer turns to autumn. Aunt Mary Maria is still at Ingleside. We get an absolutely delightful little moment in the kitchen with Susan and the visiting Rebecca Dew, both bemoaning Aunt Mary Maria. Rebecca Dew telling Susan that she's nothing short of saintly in her ability to put up with the unwanted visitor. Quote Susan, she's always getting offended and heartbroken over something, but never offended enough to up and leave. She just sits around looking lonely and neglected until poor Mrs. Doctor is almost distracted. Nothing suits her. If the window is open, she complains of drafts. If they're all shut, she says she likes a little fresh air once in a while. She cannot bear onions. She cannot even bear the smell of them. She says they make her sick. So Mrs. Doctor says, we must not use any. Now, said Susan grandly, it may be common taste to like onions, Miss Dew, dear, but we all plead guilty to it at Ingleside. I'm very partial to onions myself, admitted Rebecca Dew. Honestly, this reads like a letter to an advice column, right? I can imagine any modern day advice columnist would suggest that Anne cheerfully ignore any subtext and insinuation on Aunt Mary Maria's part. And if she constantly looks to get her feelings hurt, it will be very easy to find ways for that to happen. So you may as well do things as you like then, because she's going to get hurt either way.
So true. And also, come on, who doesn't like onions?
It's common taste to like onions. I did not know that onions were a low-class vegetable. Aunt Mary Maria must like her food very bland. Also, this is very funny. When we were writing this episode, I paused right around this section to take a little social media break. And can I tell you how many onion recipes Instagram served up to me in my feed? They all looked delicious.
Aunt Mary Maria is crazy. Onions are amazing. But I think that one of Aunt Mary Maria's worst transgressions was when it was coming close to Christmas. Yes, it is Christmas and she's still there.
By the way, she arrived in what? June. 6 months.
Real quick, parents of young children, if you are listening with the kids around, pause this episode, skip ahead about 30 seconds, okay? Trust us. We'll give you a 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So Jem, all excited about Santa, bounding down the stairs, and Aunt Mary Maria asks Jem, you surely don't believe in Santa Claus still? Anne shot a glance of alarm at Gilbert, who said gravely, we want the children to possess their heritage of fairyland for as long as they can, Auntie. So, with that, Gilbert does earn 1 small point back for standing up to her, but just 1.
And I think she guilts him after this and gets all hurt.
So one day, Anne's dear friend, Miss Cornelia, comes over for a visit. While Miss Cornelia is visiting, Anne bears her soul to her friend. She says Aunt Mary Maria is poisoning life at Ingleside in 100 small ways, none of which seems like a lot in the moment, but which all add up to something greater than the sum of their parts. Miss Cornelia says Gilbert is just like a man for not seeing it, and Anne explains that she can't turn the woman out and Gilbert won't. And Reagan, this is such a conundrum to me. Not so much that Gilbert, being clannish, won't tell her to go, but what is kind of sticking for me is that Anne feels like she can't stand up for her family and her home and either tell Aunt Mary Maria to go herself or really press on Gilbert to make her go. How is she so disempowered in this moment?
Right. I have that same question about that.
And I think that to some extent you can see that like this is a bit of the dynamic of their relationship, right? Anne is the emotional foundation of Ingleside, but Gilbert is sort of the practical fulcrum. She's laying the groundwork of kindness and understanding, but he is going to be the source of action. But when Anne is just as tired and diminished as she feels under Aunt Mary Maria's thumb, she can't be herself. She can't be the gentle, imaginative soul that we know and love. She's being crushed or poisoned, as she puts it, by these circumstances.
I also think there are two significant parts here. One that would apply even today, which is that this is Gilbert's family. And anytime we're talking about an in-law situation, the real problem is that Anne and Gilbert can't talk and agree about it. Mm-hmm. His loyalties are split. And since he doesn't have to be around Aunt Mary Maria constantly, being out and about doctoring, he can talk himself into it not being that bad. And then the second part is that at that time, I don't know if wives would have been socialized to believe that they could push back against their husbands. Even though Anne and Gilbert have likely a more egalitarian marriage than most in their time, they were still of their time.
No, I think both of those things are probably true, Reagan. And I think that part of the problem also is that, as Anne tells Miss Cornelia, she's kind of minimizing the problems Aunt Mary Maria is causing because she doesn't want to offend Gilbert by telling him how awful his aunt is. She says it's a million small things, but nothing big, so I can't really complain, when it's like, well, I don't know, man.
Well, I think one of those things about it is that when it's like that and you try and complain about it sounds so small and petty when you list out each small thing. Like, hey, but she's just an old woman and she doesn't really mean it, so just don't take it so hard or so personally. It's hard to convey the weight that is starting to rest on the house, and particularly Anne as the person who is receiving most of Aunt Mary Maria's misery, right?
I think that's right. I would question and push back a little bit on this idea that Anne sets forward that they are small things. I don't know. Frankly, I just have trouble relating to everything. And I kind of have trouble understanding this as a character moment for Anne, because this is the girl who smashed a slate over Gilbert's head. Surely she can stand up to him on behalf of her children against Aunt Mary Maria.
Right. The Anne of Windy Poplars, who dealt so masterfully with Mrs. Gibson and the variety of old cranks in that book, can't do it here. And whether that's because she's stuck in the role of wife and mother versus the independent, engaged woman she was in Windy Poplars, or because it's always easier to deal with someone else's crank than the one you have to live with day in and day out, is unclear, or it's a bit of both. But either way, you're right. It doesn't feel like our Anne from the earlier books. And it does say something a little bit to our feelings around why this book doesn't emotionally satisfy us the way most of the other books. And I think this is a big key, is that seeing Anne so dragged down, when one of the things we all love about her is her spark. It almost feels like the wife and mother of young children have smothered some of that. And Aunt Mary Maria is helping, but the fact that she can't push back to Gilbert, or she can't even speak plainly about it.
Yeah.
Gilbert, that's the piece that I think where we feel disconnected from Anne's experience.
It doesn't feel like Anne, and I think we can make allowances for being the mother of many small young children and running a household and having a lot of weight on her shoulders, but it doesn't feel like her personality, even that she is struggling this much under Aunt Mary Maria and can't find some sort of clever, saucy way to give her the boot.
Thankfully, Anne at least has a wonderful friend in Miss Cornelia, and she tells her this: we can never have any real conversations at meals because she is sure to say something disagreeable every time anyone speaks. She corrects the children for their manners continually and always calls attention to their faults before company. We used to have such pleasant meals, and now she resents laughter. And you know what we are for laughing. Somebody is always seeing a joke, or used to be. She can't let anything pass. Anne goes on to explain that Aunt Mary Maria wanted to wash Walter's mouth out with soap for telling a tall tale to die, that Nan is afraid to sleep because Aunt Mary Maria told her about a naughty child who died in her sleep. She implied that Anne and Gilbert loved Di less than Nan because Di has red hair. A ridiculous statement in light of known redhead fan, Dr. Gilbert Blythe, but it upset Di all the same. And honestly, God, I would want to punch somebody who implied to my child that I loved them slightly less because of, at all, much less because of how they looked. And luckily, Gilbert did have it out with her after that remark. But Aunt Mary Maria cried, and the next day, Gilbert apologized.
Yeah, he's back to 0 points. I take back any points I gave him.
Well, I think it goes to show how she seeped in and started to poison Gilbert, too.
Yeah.
Even Shirley, who barely exists, hates her. His only line of dialogue in this whole book is ugly old Aunt Maria.
Shirley.
So Anne is totally at her wit's end, trying to keep sane, trying to find her sense of perspective and charity and compassion for this woman who seems friendless and alone in the world. And which came first? Her sour attitude drove off relationships, or the lack of relationships created such a negative personality? But Aunt Mary Maria stays on all winter and into spring, even replanting the irises in Anne's garden.
Rude. But springtime always inspires Anne, who decides that the best thing to do is to embrace Aunt Mary Maria and just accept that she's here. So Anne decides to throw a party to celebrate Aunt Mary Maria's 55th birthday. Susan is dubious, but eventually agrees, and the two of them go to work on throwing an absolutely splendid party. They invite friends from all over Glen St. Mary for an exquisite luncheon, and Susan makes a giant cake topped with 55 candles. Gilbert goes out to hunt down 55 yellow roses, since Anne recalls that Aunt Mary Maria said that yellow roses were the only flowers she liked. Which, like, as an aside, although yellow roses are perfectly lovely, and I love yellow flowers, I think it does take a special kind of person to only like yellow roses of all the flowers in the world. It's just another little way that Aunt Mary Maria is not a kindred spirit and not of Ingleside. And although they hope to surprise Aunt Mary Maria, word gets out to her the night before that there is to be a party at Ingleside, but she doesn't know it's for her. She's hurt that she wasn't told about the party and upset that she wasn't even given enough notice to choose an appropriate dress. So things are already not starting off on the best foot, unfortunately, but I am surprised that she didn't realize the party was for her. Like, did she not know her own birthday was coming up?
Oh, she was just too busy being offended by not knowing about it.
Yeah, she just completely lost the thread. So the party begins and is by all accounts perfect. Beautiful decorations courtesy of Anne, delicious food courtesy of Susan, ice cream, and 4 different cakes. But in all the hustle and bustle of the party, Anne senses that something may be amiss. Aunt Mary Maria got a strange look on her face when Miss Cornelia wished her happy birthday. She spoke a little throughout the party, and when Susan came out of the kitchen with the cake bearing the full 55 glowing candles, Aunt Mary Maria was white with fury. Then the twins came in with the 55 yellow roses wishing her happy birthday. Now, the guests were delighted, but Aunt Mary Maria said nothing. She blew out the candle, cut the cake, and left the table in high dudgeon, gravely offended. And now perhaps I may be excused, Annie. Such an old woman as I am needs rest after so much excitement. Swish went Aunt Mary Maria's taffeta skirt. Crash went the basket of roses as she swept past it. Click went Aunt Mary Maria's high heels up the stairs. Bang went Aunt Mary Maria's door in the distance. Anne rushes to apologize to Aunt Mary Maria. She's insulted that Anne has seen fit to advertise her age to the community, particularly one cousin who has been dying to know how old she is for years. And this is ridiculous, right? I mean, I do understand that some people are sensitive about getting older, and there are certain birthdays that hit hard for all of us, but this is just so petty.
To assume that Anne meant to cause offense with it, that's the interesting choice that Aunt Mary Maria is making in the story she's telling herself, right? Like to assume deliberate offense as opposed to like, look, y'all, I don't really love surprise parties. Hey, fair.
Right. That response would have made so much more sense. You know, that's a little bit more understandable. But Aunt Mary Maria's view of the world is so twisted, and she's so convinced that people are acting against her and in bad faith, that this is what she's decided, that it's not just that they threw her a surprise party and didn't tell her about it. It's that Anne was deliberately trying to humiliate her by broadcasting her age to the community at large.
Well, and we do find out Gilbert belatedly or not so belatedly, remembers that she's always been touchy about her age and that his father used to tease her about it. So clearly she's got some deep trauma around this. That would have been more helpful information, Gilbert, if you had told Anne at the beginning.
Look, this is not Gilbert's book, Reagan. I get it. He's a doctor. He's busy. He's distracted. But he has a lot of these sort of like, oh, like derpy moments. Like, this is not his book. At any rate, Aunt Mary Maria feels she can no longer stay in a place where she has been so insulted. And after 11 months, count them 11, she finally packs up and leaves.
Hallelujah.
Truly. I've never sped a parting guest so willingly, thought Anne, half guiltily. It is nice to call your soul your own again. And once again, Anne can call her soul her own. She can call her house and her family her own. The magic of Ingleside can once again take hold now that that poisonous influence is gone. So now, the children's stories can begin again, where all of their little misadventures away from home can be cured by returning to Ingleside. So the way Anne is depicted in Anne of Ingleside, and specifically in relationship to her children, is fascinating to us. We have discussed how this book has like a very different feel than many of the other Anne books. And like we were talking about earlier, I think a part of that is the characterization of Anne herself. Because instead of this spirited, feisty girl, this clever young woman of these previous books, we get this super mother, this Madonna of her family, the typical Victorian angel in the house who can cure all childhood wounds with the power of her love. You know, and she's not just a super mother, but now she's someone who won't speak plainly to Gilbert about how Aunt Mary Maria is crushing life at Ingleside. And so that's a little bit what we mean when we call this book cloying. Anne is so busy being this like perfect mother and creating this idyllic childhood in Ingleside that she kind of stops feeling wholly human to us.
Okay, this makes me think about a discussion that just this week, the writers Anne Helen Peterson and Sarah Peterson, not related, were having over on Anne Helen's Substack Culture Study, weirdly about Princess Kate. So follow me for a quick sec.
I love all those things. I love Culture Study. I love Princess Kate. I'm in.
Listeners, if you're not reading Culture Study, we can't recommend it highly enough. It's on Substack.
It's our fave.
Well, so they were discussing the video that Kensington Palace released a couple of weeks ago that announced that Princess Kate had finished her cancer treatment and is back to health. And specifically, they were talking about the way the video was produced and the message it was trying to send about wholesomeness and healthfulness and family. And it resonated so much with me in thinking about Anne of Ingleside as well. Sarah Peterson described the video as, quote, so much glossy production value, so much emphasis on the beauty of the natural world, so much celebration of the family, and obviously femininity.
Oh my God. It truly is, though. That whole video, it really does have like big Ella Montgomery energy. And also like weirdly like big kind of TradWife energy, which now I'm like getting a little upset because I don't associate Ella Montgomery with like TradWives. I mean, I don't know how you could write Aunt Josephine and Miss Cornelia and then also like have a TradWife aesthetic, but then like thinking about this book and that connection and emphasis on the natural world and the celebration of the family and like this is what perfect femininity is. And it's like, is Anne a TradWife?
Right. I know that's the question, right? Because it's very much this idea. Anne's whole purpose is to make her children's childhood beautiful and
right,
perfect, which is often what TradWives are sort of selling. It's not about the mother as a person. It's the idea of the mother as your only self is to mother your children, right? And that's very much the question raised in that Kensington Palace video as well. In order to conclusively communicate that someone is a healthy mother of a wholesome family, not colonizers, right? We're going to forget that part.
Yeah, definitely not colonizers. No colonizers.
Not royal colonizers, but like a sweet, wholesome family.
Relatable.
Exactly. That's the aesthetic choice that these producers made in 2024 and that Maud made in 1939 writing this book. So here's some, just listen to this thing that Sarah Peterson said and think about Anne of Ingleside. She said, unsurprisingly, they're leaning into a very nostalgic construction of white nuclear family utopia. Even the idyllic rural setting is leaning into ideals of child rearing that skew specifically white. And in such utopias, the glowing mama is always the moral center.
Ugh.
Right? In this book, the glowing moral center clearly of Ingleside is Anne. And it's not so much that Anne is a TradWife TM, but it's like this kind of lifestyle and the centering of glowing motherhood is what TradWife influencers are trying to sell in this perfect package, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like TradWives want to invoke Anne of Ingleside. They're trying to retcon modern life into this turn of the century utopia. The problem with TradWife influencers is not that staying home with young children is inherently a bad thing. If that's what is right for you and your family, wonderful. The problem is that one, there's more than one way to have a happy, healthy family where everyone, including mom, thrives. And two, it's not always easy, joyful, and fulfilling, nor is it the only path to fulfillment, right? Like that's the problem with the TradWife aesthetic. It's not about what one individual person does with their family and their life choices, right? It's this other piece. So even if we look at Anne right now, she might be the glowing moral center, but even she doesn't have a TradWife aesthetic 100% of the time, right? She needs help to manage all the kids in the house. She is upfront about absolutely needing Susan.
Mm-hmm.
And we also see in this book that she's not always joyful and fulfilled because she is more complex than just being a sainted mother. And that starts to seep out later towards the end of this book.
That is so interesting to me. And then when you think about like TradWives as, like you said, almost trying to reclaim this like turn of the century aesthetic, this almost a very inspired by Ingleside aesthetic. And that's not even the reality of this fictional world of Ingleside.
Right.
Anne has help. Anne has a lot of support. Anne has a thriving community. She is not doing everything herself.
And they are extremely privileged, right? Anne and Gilbert are quite privileged.
Yep. And so even though you do have this sort of like we are connected with nature and the children are living these sort of analog childhoods with these very cute anecdotes and all of this, but still their support is a lot.
Many of the other mothers in Glen St. Mary that are Anne's contemporaries are not necessarily leading this kind of like glowing mama life.
No one in this world, as utopic as it may seem, is actually living this sort of like TradWife life or is living any kind of life that would be sort of like expressed in the like Kensington Palace video or anything.
Right. So with this centering of the glowing mama as the center of the moral universe, here we're seeing that Anne is getting to be the loving, perfect mother of young children and create this beautiful childhood for her young children that Anne herself was denied in her childhood. All of her children in their point of view chapters are pre-Anne of Green Gables age, right? They're all before 11 when they're having their point of view chapters.
Yep.
So we're getting a chance to see this corrective experience because surely this was not Anne's childhood experience. Here we're getting the message that the Ingleside kids are learning their morality from Anne's tender care, from her understanding and empathy, right? Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful. But if you think about it for a second, we also can realize that Anne didn't get anyone to shepherd her morality in her early years, did she?
No. And that's such an interesting point, Reagan. How did Anne come to her own moral compass? And I think it must have just been sort of like through reading and observation, right? She was such a bright kid. And I think maybe just some innate personal goodness, right? Like young Anne was obsessed with this idea of being angelically good, probably before she even really had a chance to learn what that meant in any kind of practical sense. And so in creating an Ingleside, a place where moral goodness is the default, this is just one of those gifts that she's bringing to her children that she didn't get herself. And every time the kids leave Ingleside, this home that represents everything that is this like perfect utopian childhood space, they end up getting into some kind of trouble or scrape. But no scrape is too terrible, and every one of them can be cured by coming home to Ingleside and to Anne.
And that's ideally what we would want for childhood, right? Anne's young childhood, we would not want for anybody. But for the Ingleside children, get a chance to live this very idealized childhood, which is an ideal for a reason.
Yeah. Let's discuss a few of those idyllic children's vignettes, beginning with oldest boy Jem and his quest for a dog. No episode defines Jem better than that of Bruno and Roddy Crawford. We learn that Jem is brave and honorable and pure-hearted. He is like a little knight errant of a boy. We know that Jem's first dog, who was much beloved, died tragically young. Anne soothed him through that experience and helped him overcome his grief. And then a few years later, Jem sees an advertisement for a dog being sold by someone named Roddy Crawford. Jem saves up his money to purchase the dog and finds out that Roddy is a young kid down in the harbor whose father has died and now has to go live in town with his aunt who won't let him keep a dog. Jem goes to buy the dog, Bruno, and he falls in love with Bruno right away. Now, this is tough. Roddy is clearly in pain to have to give his dog away, and he won't even take money for Bruno. He just wants to make sure that he has a good home. But Jem makes him take $1, so the dog feels like it's his, and it's just breaking Roddy's little heart to take the money and to let Bruno go. It's just this really tragic moment where you see Jem kind of trying to do the right thing the best he understands it, while also being aware of the heartbreak of the situation. Jem takes Bruno home, and he just adores this dog, but he learns that, quote, you can buy a dog's body, but you cannot buy his love. Bruno is sweet, but there's no spark. He's clearly looking for Roddy everywhere. Even though Jem showers him with love and kindness and treats, Bruno never licks him or wags his tail for him. It's so sad every way you look at it. Jem is in tears that Bruno doesn't love him, and Bruno is like wasting away. Bruno runs away from Ingleside, and he walks the full 6 miles in a rainstorm to go back to Roddy Crawford's old farm. Jem and Gilbert go out, and they find the dog shivering and pathetic on the doorstep.
Oh, it's so sad. Poor little Bruno.
Although Jem takes him home again, hoping that Bruno will transfer his love to Jem, Bruno starts wasting away, refusing to eat even. Finally, Gilbert goes into town, and he looks for Roddy and brings the boy back to Ingleside. When Roddy arrives at Ingleside, there's life in Bruno again, and he throws himself at Roddy. Roddy says his aunt doesn't mind him having a dog after all, but he thought since Jem bought him, he couldn't ask for him back. Jem can't say no when he sees how happy Bruno is, and how Bruno will eat when Roddy feeds him. Roddy spends the night that night at Ingleside, and Bruno sleeps between the two boys. Bruno is frisky and perky the next day, and Roddy takes him home. But this whole experience has taken the wind out of Jem's sails, and he was grumpy and short with his siblings, and as he listened to dogs barking all over the glen that night, he mourned that no dog seemed to want to be his. Anne sits beside him on the porch step, saying nothing, just letting Jem feel her sympathy. Reagan, isn't that like a top 10 parenting move, like clinically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't have to say anything, and just having your parent understand that you are in distress and sit next to you and just holding that distress with you. It's so powerful.
Yeah. Anne is really doing some lovely parenting here.
Jem feels some satisfaction at having done the right thing in returning Bruno to Roddy. He is nothing if not an honorable boy, but he's devastated by the loss nevertheless and vows to never have another dog. Maud tells us that this was true for years to come, and that while dogs would come and go at Ingleside, none would be Jem's dog until Dog Monday arrived. We start to see what makes the Ingleside kids so special in this book, right? That abiding decency and sense of honor. They seem to know that doing the right thing may be the hard thing, but it still must be done. That's a unique trait in young children. But I think they have that because they know that no matter how hard the thing they must face is, they can do it because they have this place and this family where they will always be loved and comforted and deeply understood, even when things are hard.
Another Ingleside child who has to make a hard choice is the story of Nan and Cassie Thomas. Nan is one of the Ingleside twins, and she makes friends with a slightly older child named Dovey Johnson. Dovey's 11. She's from Charlottetown, and so from 8-year-old Nan's perspective, Dovey must know everything. Nan is fascinated by the story she tells, although Maud informs the reader that Dovey was not a very truthful child, and that Nan, quote, brought up at Ingleside where nobody ever told anything but the truth, even as a joke, was too innocent and credulous to know that.
Okay, Reagan, this is an interesting observation about life at Ingleside, and one I'd like to take just like a minute to tease out a little. So no one ever tells lies at Ingleside? What? I mean, so much so, though, that like someone like Nan can't tell the difference between a real story and a made up one or an exaggerated one. Like, I kind of feel like I have to call shenanigans here. So when Maud is telling us that no one ever told anything but the truth at Ingleside, this is another one of these instances where she's setting up Ingleside as a place of superior moral value against the rest of the world.
Certainly against the rest of Glen St. Mary.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those things in this book that feels like a little too like cloyingly sweet to be real. We fell in love with Anne because she was imperfect. That's the Anne and Gilbert we know, the mocking boy and the hot-headed girl, not these like paragons of truth and virtue.
Well, and I think we don't have to go with Maud's reasoning here that it's because Inglesiders are so truthful that Nan can't sense a lie when she hears it.
Oh.
Truly, I think developmentally, it's much more that at this age, kids really do believe other kids, especially slightly older ones. I remember Alice coming home with some seriously bananas stories from friends, some of which were outright lies, which, the kids were deliberately telling. Some of them were misunderstandings and exaggerations. And there was definitely a few I had to specifically debunk because she fell for them hook, line, and sinker because she was a kid and the other child spoke with total authority. When she was in kindergarten, a friend told her that Jojo Siwa, the little pop star, had murdered someone.
Stop.
A different friend in second grade told her that she had been on every continent, including Antarctica.
Oh, yeah. I would take a 7-year-old to Antarctica.
My favorite one, a friend tried to convince Alice to share her dessert by saying that her parents had a sugar zapping gun that zapped the sugar out of all of her snacks. So therefore she needed Alice's cookie.
Please tell me Alice did not give her cookies to this kid with a sugar zapping gun.
She didn't. But she was not 100% convinced that the sugar zapping gun didn't exist. She was pretty sure that wasn't the truth, but she was like, I didn't want to give her my cookie anyway.
She was like, but real quick, just to confirm, that technology does not exist, right?
Right. Regardless of the reason, the fact remains that Nan is a credulous kid and Dovey tells interesting stories. So when Dovey starts taunting Nan with that old, I know something you don't know, Nan simply must know.
Yeah.
Dovey even drops to Nan that the secret involves her and that it's very romantic, like a fairy tale. This only makes Nan even more curious, as it would. Dovey lords this secret over Nan for a bit. She's having a good deal of fun with this until Nan agrees that she'll give Dovey her new red parasol for the secret.
This is a terrible bargain.
Yeah, but the I have a secret about you, that's catnip. That's total catnip. And remember that Dovey is older than Nan. The difference between an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old is significant. So I bet that curiosity is just eating Nan up inside. So Dovey makes Nan promise to bring the parasol the next day. No parasol, no secret. And she makes Nan swear she cannot tell anyone else at Ingleside about the secret. As a parting jibe, Dovey tells Nan that her mother thinks it was a mistake for Gilbert to marry Anne. Dovey says nobody knew anything about her family and that Gilbert could have married many other girls. And you would think that this was just wild for a rando kid to share, but it turns out that Dovey Johnson is actually a Pye. Her mother is a cousin of the Avonlea Pyes. So, yeah.
We should have known that Dovey was a Pye.
Yeah, right from the beginning. That sounds, everything she says could have come right out of Josie Pye's mouth.
Absolutely.
The next day, Nan ponies up with the parasol. She sort of slunk away from the house with it because she did kind of know that adults would have stopped her. But she's in. She's going to trade for the secret. Dovey starts to like waver a bit now that Nan has called her bluff, maybe not having thought her story all the way through. She might not have thought it would have gotten this far.
Right? It almost makes it seem like she's kind of making up the story on the spot.
Yeah, she got as far as like, I got something juicy and then
didn't fully flesh it out. Yeah.
But Nan is desperate and in a frenzy to know the secret, and she demands that Dovey tell her. So this is what Dovey comes out with. Dovey tells her that Nan is actually Cassie Thomas, and Cassie Thomas is actually Nan Blythe. Cassie Thomas is the daughter of Jimmy Thomas, known by the local kids as Six-Toed Jimmy. He lives down at the harbor mouth and sometimes sells fish to the folks at Ingleside. According to Dovey, Di and Nan were born the same night as Cassie, and the nurse, who hated Anne for some unexplained reason, replaced Nan with Cassie after their births. Quote, and that is why you're really Cassie Thomas, and you ought to be living down there at the harbor mouth, and poor Cass ought to be up at Ingleside instead of being banged on by that old stepmother of hers. I feel sorry for her many a time. Dovey goes on to point out that Cassie has red hair like Di does, so therefore she must really be Di's twin. And this explains why Nan and Di don't look alike. Dovey says she found out from the nurse's deathbed confession to Dovey's Aunt Kate. Nan believes all of this. She's always wondered why she and Di don't look alike. Everybody mentions it. She realizes that she has promised not to tell anyone, so now she has to figure out what to do with this information alone. Nan knows that Cassie Thomas has a much harder life than she does. The Thomases are poor, Jimmy Thomas drinks, and his wife apparently abuses Cassie. So now Nan believes she has no right to live at Ingleside and no right to her parents' love, and she's consumed by the injustice of the situation. She has enjoyed the 8 years of comfort that Cassie should have had.
And just to take a moment to say that all children deserve an Ingleside childhood, not just Anne and Gilbert's children, right? Regardless of who Cassie's parents were, she also deserved to grow up with safety and kindness.
Nan is racked with guilt. Guilt at keeping this terrible secret from her family, guilt that she is living the life that Cassie should have had, guilt that she'll continue to have and more advantages than Cassie simply by being a virtue of being a Blythe from Ingleside.
And this is such a fascinating moment to me. Like, it speaks to Nan's incredible empathy. And I think about, there's this moment where she's talking about all the nice things that are going to happen to her in her life, and then realizing that all those nice things should actually be happening to Cassie. I know kids can clock differences in class and family situations among their peers, but I'm not sure how many other kids can really put themselves in the shoes of other kids the way that Nan does in this episode.
Well, this knowledge that she has a beautiful life and Cassie has a hard life feels so deeply unjust that it starts making Nan ill. Nan resolves she has to make it right. She walks down to the harbor to the fishing village where the houses smell like fish and groups of dirty children harass her as she looks for the Thomas house. When she finally finds the Thomas house, she sees that the kitchen is a mess and Mrs. Thomas is nursing a baby covered in grime. Nan is frightened by the entire tableau, but she goes inside and explains that she is actually Cassie. Mrs. Thomas is bewildered at first, not even knowing who Nan is, but upon learning that the source of Nan's information is Dovey, she sets Nan straight right away. Cassie is over a year older than Nan at least, and Dovey is, in Mrs. Thomas's words, a little pill. Mrs. Thomas has been doing some laundry for Dovey's aunt during the summer, so she knows that Dovey is a piece of work. Mrs. Thomas also tells Nan that she remembers the night that Nan was born. She had been to Ingleside on an errand and even met Nan's grandmother, Gilbert's mother, whom Nan resembles.
Now that was lucky.
That was lucky and does explain for Nan why she looks different from Di, which, by the way, though, question, nobody else in the Blythe family has ever said, "Oh, Nan, you look just like your grandmother."
Even maybe explain to her that fraternal twins exist.
But in any case, Nan is deeply relieved to learn that she is herself. She runs home through a terrible storm. Anne catches her as she runs through the door, and Nan spills everything. Anne assures the little girl that although it was foolish to believe Dovey, Nan did something heroic that night, and she's proud of her. And again, we have this story of the Blythe children are especially honorable and good and brave, even in the face of terrible things, and that the source of their goodness is their mother, who can set everything right in the end. Anne's motherly comforting puts Nan right to sleep with a clear conscience. And when Anne checks in on her later that night, she's sleeping with a smile on her face. Anne has a moment to reflect on how much she loves her children, loves that they come to her with all their loves and griefs and mischiefs. She has a sense that this time will pass soon, and she feels the sweetness and terribleness of motherhood.
And then Anne has a similar moment at the very end of the book, after she and Gilbert have celebrated their anniversary, and Anne has gone from feeling jealous and overlooked to adored and cherished all in the space of an evening. They had had dinner with Christine Stewart, Gilbert's friend from college, whom Anne had mistakenly believed he was dating. Gilbert was distracted for much of the night thinking about a patient, and Anne felt his disinterest sharply. But when they came home from dinner, Gilbert got word that his patient survived and also, luckily, received in the mail the diamond pendant he had ordered Anne for their anniversary. And so, they were able to reconnect. Diamonds have that effect on people.
You know what? They're a nice bonus. It's a nice bonus.
So as the book is winding down, Anne is feeling full of love for Gilbert and her life at Ingleside and goes from room to room checking on her children while they sleep. Quote, "They were all growing so fast. In just a few short years, they would all be young men and women, youth tiptoe, expectant, a star with its sweet wild dreams, little ships sailing out of safe harbor to unknown ports. The boys would go away with their life work, and the girls, the mist-veiled forms of beautiful brides might be seen coming down the old stairs at Ingleside. But they would be still hers for a few years yet, hers to love and guide, to sing the songs that so many mothers had sung, hers and Gilbert's." It is such a lovely moment for Anne, and it also captures her philosophy of motherhood. She's there to love and to guide, to provide shelter and safe harbor, and Ingleside itself is the physical embodiment of Anne as a mother, a place of love and guidance for the Blythe children, a place to return to shelter and safety when they have been battered about by the forces of the universe. This theme will sound with even more resonance as the series goes on.
So let's move into our birch path today. And I wanted to talk a little bit about child development, a little bit more in depth, particularly the idea of goodness. So we know that young Anne despaired of ever being angelically good, and that was because she felt like she was too impulsive, unfocused, made too many mistakes. Also likely because she lived places where she was not loved and was taken harshly to task over the kinds of mistakes that most children make as they grow. We see that in Maud's books and in the time period in which she was writing, goodness for children was really what we would call obedience, right?
Hmm.
And this goes back to when we talked about authoritarian parenting style in episode 30, when we talked about Windy Poplars. So that's a fun little revisit if you want to go back there. So Anne was never a bad child in the sense of deliberately causing mischief or being malicious, but she was impulsive. She had a temper. She was easily distracted. She had that kind of intelligence, which meant she was asking uncomfortable questions and picked up on hypocrisy of the adults around her. She was frequently told she wasn't good because she wasn't always immediately obedient. But when we're talking about moral goodness, as adults, we can see that that kind of goodness is pretty limiting, right? We have developmental theories around moral development, just as we do around cognitive development. And I'm not going to go in depth around most of them. Like most developmental theories, they're often centered on the male experience and the white European Western experience. So they've got their own problems with that. But one of the things we do know, and it seems very clear, is that moral reasoning grows and changes over time, just as our cognitive ability does, right?
I didn't know that. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but I didn't know that. Of course, you're not born moral or immoral or anything like that. Of course, that's something you learn, but I haven't thought about it the same way we think of, like, I don't know, learning to read.
Yeah. And just as like you can't learn to read before you're cognitively ready to be able to read, no matter what those infomercials try to tell you, you cannot teach most 2-year-olds to read. Their brains are not ready for it yet.
Yeah.
Right. At best, you're going to get some memorization, right?
Yeah.
The same thing goes for moral development, where it's not just that you haven't learned it, it's that as you develop cognitively, as you develop emotionally, you have more and more capacity for moral reasoning.
Okay.
What I'll see when folks come to me and let's say their child is lying or they've been stealing, right? Common childhood behaviors. Parents are very worried. Are they going to grow up to be a liar? Are they going to grow up to be a thief? And generally not. Moral development in young kids is often related to obedience because young children, not just because that's what we expect from kids traditionally and even still now, right? Somebody's considered good is if they follow directions right away, right?
Yeah.
If they're obedient, but that's not actual goodness. But even young kids think of what's good and bad in concrete terms. They often are trying to figure out what's good and bad using reward and punishment or strict adherence to rules coming from authority figures or systems, right? There's two kind of major ways that kids experience this when they're still thinking concretely. So one is that if you get rewarded for it, it must be morally good. If you get punished for it, it must be morally bad. So really, it's like whether or not you get caught and punished, not necessarily the thing itself. And so that's why kids often have that immediate knee-jerk response to lie when they get in trouble. Like you can be showing them the camera footage of them breaking the vase with their baseball bat. They can be standing over the broken vase with their baseball bat. If you ask them, did you do this? If they are 6 or 7 years old, the first thing they're going to say is nope.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's because it's this immediate going towards, if I can avoid punishment, that means I'm not bad.
Oh, wow.
Even though as adults, we think about like, and then they lied on top of it, which is even worse.
I know a lot of adults who think that if they can avoid punishment, then they are still good.
Yeah. Well, you're a lawyer.
Very true, Reagan. Very true.
It's true, though. So, because not all of us grow out of that moral stage of development, and we're not all equally moral in all situations.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? We don't apply our moral reasoning equally in every single situation. Like, that's just true. The other way this shows up, and again, you will see this in young kids, is this is why little kids are major tattletales about other people's wrongdoings. And they love to point out when adults break rules because rules are very binary to them. It's all about whether or not you broke the rules. It's not about, hey, did I think about the situation in which this rule exists?
Right.
Does the situation apply all the time? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. It's just that very sort of black and white thinking when there's nuances. There's nuances to everything. Things are not always so black and white, especially when you're an adult. You know, not thinking about, well, there's intent as part of this. And what did you know at the time versus what do you know now? Morality is complicated. That's why philosophy exists.
Right, right. This is why moral philosophers have been wrestling with this type of thing for literally hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Thousands, really, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So what's interesting in Anne of Ingleside is that the two stories we talked about, Jem and Nan, is that we are seeing Anne's children starting to develop this moral reasoning, and they're moving outside of concrete rules and outside of the reward punishment orientation. And I think it's supposed to be a testament to the way that Anne and Gilbert are raising their kids, that their kids are developing this sense of moral justice that is starting to be more complex. So for instance, when we're talking about Jem, he has to decide what to do here. And legally, he's fine. He bought the dog belongs to him. He wouldn't have to give him up. And he could focus also on the fact that he hasn't done anything wrong, and that giving Bruno away would hurt Jem himself, right? And nobody is passing out rewards or punishments here. And the adults aren't telling him what to do, or that if he doesn't give Bruno up, he'll get in trouble. He has to decide for himself. But we know, certainly as adults looking at the situation, what Jem comes to understand, that giving Bruno back to Roddy is the right thing to do. It's right for Bruno, who is dying of a broken heart away from Roddy, and it's the right thing to do for Roddy.
Yeah.
But doing the right thing punishes Jem. Jem's ability to think about what might be good for Bruno and to put himself in Roddy's shoes helps him make a morally good decision that is ultimately self-sacrificing. Mm-hmm. And that tells us a lot about this young man that Jem is starting to become. And Maud is definitely showing us that Anne and Gilbert are helping Jem grow in this direction. Gilbert knew what he was doing when he tracked down Roddy and gave Jem the chance to make it right.
Yes.
But didn't force Jem to do it. He didn't lecture him. He didn't tell him. He didn't make the decision for him, but he provided the circumstances to give Jem this character defining moment. We also see this in Nan's case, right? Nan is really driven by this idea of justice and injustice, which are very abstract ideas.
I know. Everything about the Nan chapter impresses me so much.
She's very sad to think about not being Anne and Gilbert's child, but mostly she is haunted by the injustice of this situation. Mm-hmm. She feels like she stole Cassie's life, Cassie's good life, and that every time she's enjoying her nice life while knowing that it should belong to Cassie, it sparks this sense of justice, right? That's pretty sophisticated moral thinking.
Yeah.
And we do have this moment of going back to that concrete thinking. It doesn't occur to her to tell Anne because that would be breaking her promise to Dovey. That's pretty concrete.
Right. So you see the tension for Nan, who is like moving from concrete moral thinking to abstract moral thinking. And she's like caught betwixt and between a little bit.
Right. Exactly. Right. Like a promise is a promise is a promise. Right.
Yeah. So I can't say anything to my mom. However, I am going to move.
Right. Exactly. I don't think she thought it all the way through. The injustice of it, she can't sit and be part of this injustice anymore. Yeah. That's the part that's haunting it. And so that's why she goes and confesses it to Mrs. Thomas. It's very brave to pursue justice when you know that justice will hurt you.
Yeah.
It's easy to do the right thing when it's easy. And this story with Nan sounds very silly at the outset. Why she just wouldn't ask her parents about this right away or believe something so outlandish from a clearly manipulative kid. It's silly that it got that far. But it's a really illuminating moment about Nan's character and tells us a lot about Nan's sense of right and wrong.
And her own sense of self-sacrifice. Both of them have this sense of self-sacrifice here, and they're willing to do the morally right thing, even though it's going to hurt them.
Yeah. I do wish we could have seen more of Anne and Gilbert's active parenting, not just the cleaning up and consoling aftermath. I'd love to see how they are actively teaching morality and values and empathy to their kids. Even today, we want to know, how do we raise good kids, not just obedient kids, kids who make good decisions when the situation is murky or unclear or when the rules seem unjust. We want our kids to have a strong sense of right and wrong that will steer them when we aren't there to make decisions for them.
Yeah.
We can see that Anne is great at providing a place for the kids to express their raw emotions, and that's going to help the kids work through their experiences and gain perspective.
Well, yeah. And I think that also speaks to the harm of having Aunt Mary Maria there, silencing those conversations. That's in a way prohibiting some of this moral development.
Exactly. Aunt Mary Maria prefers the obedience construct, right? So Anne and Gilbert's more emotionally attuned parent leads to kids who are less classically seen and not heard, but are encouraged to be thoughtful and empathic, tuned into the bigger picture of right and wrong, tuned into the idea of learning and growing from your mistakes. That's a longer road to goodness than just obedience, which is a short road, but very narrow.
Oh, Reagan, this is fascinating. I didn't know a lot of this. I especially didn't realize that morality was something that developed the same way like cognition or physical ability or any of these other things. Absolutely fascinating and interesting to see how it plays out in our book.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, kindred spirits, moving into our inspired by section. We are feeling inspired by Ingleside in this episode, and we wanted to share a few of our favorite things that have turned our houses into our homes. So, for mine, I have a few very pretty pieces of furniture that I inherited from my grandmother. Now, her apartment was decorated to the nines in like that Federalist revival style that was super popular in the mid 1970s. It looks like you walked out of Monticello in there.
That's certainly a choice.
It was a bold choice. So I have a few things from that apartment, including this little like half moon occasional table and then this Tiffany blue curio cabinet. And both of these are just like painted and gilded and marbled within an inch of their lives. So when I first took possession of them, I was not even 30 yet. And I always felt they stuck out badly in my little, just sort of like just starting out house.
With the IKEA furniture aesthetic?
I mean, with the IKEA furniture, with like the salvaged from the street furniture.
With the dog definitely is sleeping on this couch furniture.
Exactly right. Yep. It's been nearly 15 years since these pieces of furniture came to me. And I think we've finally grown into them. And now our house is a nice, comfortable sort of like mishmash of styles. And those pieces have also encouraged me to do more shopping for vintage or antique furniture, before going right to the store and buying something new. Not only will the quality and prices generally be better, but I do think that a pre-loved furniture piece just brings like a little bit more charm and energy into your house that helps it move from house to home. So that's my inspired by to share with you all. Shop vintage, shop estate sales, shop antique and thrift stores and yard sales. It will take longer to put together your home of dreams, but I think the results will be worth it.
Well, I love your house style and those particular pieces, especially that curio cabinet with your fancy teacups in it. I love it so much.
Well, most of those teacups were hers too.
I love your grandmother.
I do too. I miss her.
Well, this is a funny prompt, Kelly, because as you know, we literally just finished some significant home improvement over the summer, as well as we're doing a room overhaul for my daughter.
You guys have been busy.
Yeah, this has been a very home-centric, like summer, early fall for us.
Yeah. You also know that you are of a certain age when you get very excited about your best friend's pantry renovation.
It looks good, right?
It really does.
Love a pantry. I'm so excited. Anyway, so that's not really a practical recommendation. A more practical inspired by, as Kelly and I have discussed in the past, very recently, we are pet people in our house. We currently have a dog and a cat and a child who is a lot less messy than she used to be, but not completely, still possibly spilling things on the couch. not completely out of that stage. Our dog only recently outgrew her velociraptor stage, so the couch was looking a bit worse for wear. And we've tried a whole variety of solutions because the beige couch was not looking so beige anymore. Because our dog, she likes to bury her toys in the dirt, then dig them back up, and then bring them to the couch to chew on them.
What a classy lady Luna is. What a classy girl.
So we finally invested in the Nolan interior magic sofa covers, and these are worth every penny. I love it. Rather than being like a big thing that fits over all your couch cushions that you have to kind of like tuck and push under the couch cushions, which we've done before. These are kind of like stretchy and they fit over each single couch cushion and they fit kind of snugly but easily. You don't have to zip anything. You don't have to like shove anything into the couch cushions. They just kind of like pop over top and go underneath. They're so easy to wash. They make our couch look so much neater, not quite so ragtag. They come in lots of colors to match your couch. So if you have pets or messy kids, then these are really great. I highly recommend them.
I've seen these on your couch. They do look good.
Yeah,
they're
right?
Really sleek and smooth.
Yes, that's the Nolan interior magic sofa covers. So go forth and cover your couches. Well, thank you for joining us, Kindred Spirits. We hope you'll join us next episode as we discuss the theme of community in Anne of Ingleside and the Blythe's position in the Glen St. Mary community. If you're enjoying the podcast, please tell your friends, leave us reviews on your podcatcher of choice, and share about our podcast on your social media feeds. These are all great ways for new Kindred Spirits to find the podcast and share the love of all things Anne. If you do review or share the podcast, send us an email at kindredspirits.bookclub@gmail.com or DM us on your Instagram, also kindredspirits.bookclub, and we'll send you a beautiful Kindred Spirits Book Club sticker, perfect to adorn your water bottle or e-reader. Follow us on Instagram too for peeks into upcoming episodes, links to our past recommendations, and other bookish goodness. As always, thank you for listening, Kindred Spirits.
Thank you and goodbye.